This video is sponsored by Owlcat and a new DLC for Rogue Trader called Void Shadows. Void Shadows is the first DLC for Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, offering a massive amount of content with about 15 hours of fresh gameplay and a new romanceable companion. Fully integrated into the game's main story, this DLC will allow players to delve into the depths of the Void ship firsthand in an enthralling new story that will pit them against an unfamiliar enemy trying to bring ruin to the Von Valancius dynasty from within. Link in the description. And if you like this content, like, subscribe, and hit that notification. Do you like long games? Did you ever play a game for 100 hours and think to yourself, man, that was a good game? Too bad it's so short. Do you like emo chicks that spend more time cutting on themselves than they do cutting their hair?
Holy Jesus. What is that? What is that?
A girl whose face has seen more holes than a campground shithouse? Picture it. You're sitting at your desk, watching YouTube while keeping an eye on the periphery to see if your boss is sneaking up behind you, and you might be thinking, man, I would trade this job for an entry-level position in a death cult in a heartbeat. I wouldn't have to wake up early anymore, sit in traffic, or pretend that I don't hear voices all the time. I'd wake up around 2 in the afternoon, stalk some guy, wait until he's in an isolated spot and kill him, grab a bowl of gross-looking snot soup, and that's my day, you know? 2 hours of work, and I'm back at headquarters listening to 30 Seconds to Mars while I write poems in my journal. Void Shadows gives you all of that and more, and I'm gonna take this opportunity to teach you how to build an effective, brutal killing machine that will make your experience with the Void Shadows DLC that much easier on day one. So, let's dig in, shall we? KIBELLA's the kind of girl who hears voices when she's asleep at night, but unlike that one great aunt on your mother's side, her voices are real. She's got a direct hotline to the Emperor himself. He calls her up on his brain phone and he's like,
"Hey girl, KIBELLA, what's going on?
Yeah, Biggie, what can I do for ya?
Well, there's this guy on ship that says that I, quote, fuck cats. And, as you know, that can't be true. I don't even like cats, so I'm gonna need you to kill this dude for me."
Anything for you, Biggie.
and she does it just like that. No questions asked, like maybe Big E's brain phone got hacked and it's Zinch playing a prank, or maybe I'm hearing voices because I'm insane. No. She's just like any red-blooded Imperium citizen, and she carries out her orders without a single thought passing through that stupid little brain of hers, and that's why we love her, folks. That's a pure faith build right there. Blade Dancer is a unique class in both origin and mechanics. You see, you get two abilities with this archetype: Blade Dance and Death from Above. Blade Dance is like an AoE melee attack, but with a twist. The default ability allows you to attack twice against random targets within melee range. And when I say random, I mean really random, because if you have a companion standing next to them, when she does that, that companion is going to lose an eye when they get caught by one of her flailing arms. Blade Dance deals half the damage of a normal attack, but because there's two of them, your minimum damage potential is doubled, but the end damage is still the same. It also costs 2 AP to use, which is 1 AP less than a dual wield attack. You can increase the amount of strikes with this skill by using certain talents, but the damage can be underwhelming. But you can also increase the amount of times that you'll hit an enemy with this skill by increasing your agility. So if you could stack agility, you could potentially get a lot of damage out of this skill. If you couple this with a damage over time build, you can potentially apply a dot to several enemies, which boosts your damage potential per turn. Another good thing about this ability is the fact that it doesn't count towards your max attacks per turn, so it can be used to clean up any enemies that survived your initial single target melt. Much like Blade Dance, Death from Above is an attack that doesn't count towards your max attacks, and as a bonus, doesn't even use AP. And on top of that, it allows you to jump 2 cells away like you're some kind of Cirque du Soleil clown and attack without triggering attacks of opportunity. If you can find a way to make it work, Death from Above is an excellent way to clean up multiple wounded enemies. But the key is, you only get a charge of this ability when you kill an enemy. and you have to kill them with an attack that isn't death from above. You combine this with acrobatic artistry, and you have a real beefy ability worthy of your time. Next, let's talk about your attribute scores. These scores determine how well you do things, and you need to know where your bonuses from talents will be coming from before leaning heavily into one score or another. Agility is the main attribute that we'll be leveling because it's the one that gives us the most bonuses from the talents in the Blade Dancer class. Agility is also important because it gives us a bonus to our initiative, which determines when we get to act in turn order, and gives us a bonus to our dodge. Weapon skill is the next most important attribute, but it's really neck and neck with agility because weapon skill determines your parry chance and your ability to reduce the enemy's parry chance. And on top of all of that, increases your critical hit chance. It's not a stat that you want to sleep on. And last but not least is toughness and strength. And this is a personal choice. You go for strength if you want more damage on melee attacks, or toughness if you plan on leaning into the self-damaging abilities. I recommend toughness, but it's up to you at the end of the day. Strength is also a really good choice for burst damage, but it doesn't synergize as well with the Blade Dancer class. Toughness will give us more hit points, or wounds as the game calls them, and also increase our chance to resist status effects. Since we'll be hurting ourselves to see if we still feel, we'll need as many wounds as we can get. For abilities, the Blade Dancer has some really good options, but there's some abilities that seem amazing, but end up not being all that useful near the end of the middle chapters. Acrobatic artistry allows you to return to the spot where you started the round when used, but there's a catch. If you use death from above in that round, you will repeat your death from above attacks in reverse, which means if anyone survived your initial attacks, no they didn't. Blood Oath is a self-damaging ability that makes your next attack pretty much a guarantee by nullifying the enemy's dodge and parry. If you kill the enemy, you get 11 wounds healed and 1 action point restored. It is a fantastic ability, and you might be looking at the temp damage and saying to yourself, no way am I taking that, but listen, you'll be taking talents later that nullify the negative effects of taking damage, so trust me, it's worth it. Captive Audience is a must-take ability, and you only get to take 2 for your first archetype, so you have a choice to make. Do I take Acrobatic Artistry or Blood Oath? I recommend taking Blood Oath because I found that being able to repeat my attacks in reverse wasn't so useful when I was able to kill everything in one hit, which is our goal with this build. Captive Audience allows your next attack, which can be any attack by the way, to inflict bleeding on the enemy for all targets hit with that attack. So to recap, we want 2 abilities, Blood Oath and Captive Audience. The reason being is we get a lot of cool stuff whenever we use our regular single target attack. We want many dots because the Executioner archetype that was added with this DLC benefits greatly from damage over time effects. Next, we need to talk about talents. Talents are where we'll be getting the majority of our damage from, so this is probably the most important part of the build and the thing that you'll spend the most time reading through. You only get 7 talents in the first archetype, so you have to choose carefully to maximize your effectiveness in combat. We'll start with the optional talents first. Now, these are the talents that you can choose to take instead of the recommended ones in case you're looking for a different playstyle for your Blade Dancer or you just somehow want to have a worse character. Look, I'm not here to judge, you do what you want. Death Warden. This is important because you're going to find a lot of trinkets that'll increase your Medicae bonus, and you can stack those together to get a significant bonus to your crit damage, and it also allows you to heal allies, so that's a nice little bonus. This is an optional talent, however, because the bonus isn't mind-blowing, but I always end up picking it up because it synergizes with the items that we're going to get later. So you don't necessarily need to pick this up now, you can actually wait until your 3rd archetype and pick it then. Rising Tempo. This talent is another maybe. You don't have to take it if you're speccing into single target damage, but you can, especially if you find yourself killing enemies in a single hit a lot. Remember, every time we kill, we get a charge of death from above. So you could potentially attack 3 or more times in a single round. This talent is more up to how you play the character. As far as I'm concerned, this talent has diminishing returns since it only stacks 3 times, and I've had rounds where a heroic action saw my Blade Dancer kill about 6 guys in one round. Escape Artist. Escape Artist gives you a charge of death from above whenever you dodge an attack from an enemy attacking you for the first time. It can be useful for extending combat rounds, and with the Navigator abilities, you can put melee enemies into range of the Blade Dancer, which makes her chance to dodge an attack higher due to her being the closest target. This, however, is another maybe ability. Death from above seems great at first, but it isn't that great in practice. It's a way to extend your turn, but it's not an extremely damaging ability. It's free damage, however, that doesn't cost AP, so it's good for that reason. Use this talent if you believe you can make good use of it. Guillotine is good depending on your playstyle. If you are using the Blade Dancer to attack enemies at full health, say priority targets, and you need to kill them as quickly as possible, this is not the talent for you. But if your Blade Dancer is part of the cleanup crew, this is a great talent that can help you extend rounds and take out more enemies that are low on health. Now, the following abilities are the ones that I found synergize the best with my playstyle. See, in Rogue Trader, you have archetypes that you pick at certain milestones. So you build a character not by focusing on what your starting archetype can do, but by what your second archetype can do. And since your Executioner focuses on damage over time, we need to make sure everything we do with our Blade Dancer synergizes with damage over time. Blade in his hand allows you to add your agility bonus to your damage with swords, and that damage is doubled if using a two-handed sword, which we will be doing. Blood Rush is useful for getting around the battlefield. If used right, you can move after attacking by using a self-damaging ability right after your attack and moving to the next target. Getting movement after an attack is extremely helpful to melee classes, and this is a fact that you should keep in mind for building Abelard as well. Feel No Pain is a very important talent for this build, as we'll be using self-damaging abilities to buff our attacks, and temporary wounds will further boost our attacks with other talents, so we want temp wounds as much as possible. In-Depth Footsteps is an amazing talent. Every time your allies kill an enemy, which they'll be doing a lot, you gain movement points. I've seen my Blade Dancer move from one side of the arena to the other in a single combat round. Say you have a sniper that is causing you grief. This is where this talent comes in handy, because you can close distance with that sniper and get them off the board before they even have a chance to become annoying. Promises of Blood restores 1 AP whenever you use Blood Oath if that attack kills the target, which means that you can get 2 AP restored to you on the first attack in your round. It's a very good talent for later levels when you'll be using multiple abilities turn 1. Now, Spinning Blades is very situational. If you're going to be using the Blade Dancer to attack mostly melee targets and act more as a tank, chances are she'll be parrying a lot. If so, this is the talent for you. If not, may I suggest taking Race Against Death. This talent increases your max wounds by your dodge divided by 10. So basically 10% of your dodge essentially. I've had the Blade Dancer at 95% in dodge, which means I got an extra 9 wounds. In fact, the only person on the team that had even close to the same amount of wounds by the end of the game was my Navigator, believe it or not. Finally, Unforgiving is great because you'll be taking wounds either by getting hit or by cutting on yourself for attention from boys. This 8% bonus will basically be on you every round, so it's a great talent to take for this playstyle. Now we gotta talk about the second archetype added by this DLC, and this one doesn't disappoint. Let's talk about the Executioner. This is where things start to get interesting for the Blade Dancer, because this whole time you've been cutting on yourself to become stronger. And that's fun and all, but wouldn't you like to cut on other people to make yourself stronger? Making people bleed is the Executioner's bag. It's her jam. She's got a special pair of boots just for stepping on dudes. The Executioner is the master of pain. Depending on how you build your character, you could go with Arch Militant, and that would be fine, but our build makes good use of the Blade Dancer archetype and Dot. And with some synergies from Jay and Heinrichs, you could be stacking buffs from Dots like crazy. Here's how this class works. See that guy who's currently healthy and not on fire, or bleeding, or vomiting? That is undesirable. Our job is to make sure that he is bleeding out of every hole in his body, even the new ones we create for him, puking from every orifice, all the while gasping for air as he flails around trying to put out the flames, eating him up from the outside. When he's got dots, he takes more damage, which results in a satisfying pop when we so much as touch him with the sharp end of our sword. This combo hits so hard that even the frame rate goes for a nap. It's a 1-2 punch for your video card. The Executioner gets 3, count 'em, 3 Keystone features right off the bat. The first one is called Where It Hurts. Where It Hurts is dummy thick, stupidly good, and it's the ability that will see us killing just about any enemy we attack with our single target attacks. How it works is, if the enemy has a boo-boo and needs a band-aid, or if they need to stop, drop, and roll, or if they've eaten a McDonald's McFish sandwich today and really need to find a quiet moment to ruin someone's toilet, your next attack on them will make them suffer damage for each effect they've got. So, if you take the dogmatic approach to morality, then enemies will be almost guaranteed to be burning, but they'll also be bleeding because of the next talent that you get, Scourging Strikes. This makes every melee attack from your Executioner inflict 6 stacks of bleeding. This is good because this effect applies after all other effects are applied. So you start your combat round by closing distance, using Death from Above for your opening attack, which gives the enemy 6 stacks of bleed. Then Where It Hurts and a single target attack, and watch that guy exsanguinate in front of you, leaving behind only ribs and giblets. Finally, we get Forced Repentance. Whenever the Executioner gifts the enemy with a damage over time effect, the enemy suffers damage from that dot immediately, and the level of that dot increases by 2 and stacks. So if you've got a big beefy boy who needs to go down, using all of these features effectively will chop down that tree in a hurry. It is the very definition of death by 1,000 cuts. For ability scores, you won't have access to agility, so you'll need to focus down on weapon skill and toughness, then strength. Remember, strength gives us more damage, but so does toughness, so we want both. If you don't have anything else to use it on, use your common talent slots on characteristic training for agility, toughness, and weapon skill. Then there's your heroic ability. Carnival of Misery gives all damage over time effects 100% extra damage. This is devastating when you're running builds that focus on toxic, bleed, and burn damage for people like Jay and Heinrichs. Now let's talk about abilities. Reckless Abandon is an interesting ability that replaces 30% of your wounds with temporary HP. Then, while you have those temp wounds, you get 30% of your maximum wounds in extra damage. And the cool thing is, the temporary wounds stick around. So not only are you not losing health, but now cutting makes you stronger. Thus is the power of an e-girl. The more emo we get, the stronger the gravitational pull around us becomes. Tremble, ye mortals, for I will get your donations and your Twitch subs. This is why increasing the amount of wounds you have is so helpful. because it allows you to get more damage with skills like these. Pain Resonance is great for when you have a bunch of enemies that you couldn't kill around you who have dots on them, and you want them to no longer be taking damage from dots because they're already dead. An enemy with a dot around you will take an instance of damage from each dot that they have, and if they fail a resistance test, they get another problem to add on to the list of other problems. If they bleed, they get blinded. If they're burning, they get slowed. If they're toxic, they get staggered. It's a great way to screw over a group of enemies and make sure that they don't get to have any fun on their next turn. Gift of Torment looks at the whole battlefield, and if anyone, even your own teammates, are bleeding, you get half your toughness bonus in armor. Burning, same bonus to your dodge chance. Toxic, 1 deflection per creature to a maximum of your toughness bonus. And in case you didn't know what deflection does, here's what it does. Let's say the enemy is trying to do damage to you. You just stop them and say, "Hey, are you trying to hurt me?" And they'll say, "Yeah, why?" And you'll just go, "Nuh-uh." Your deflection amount subtracts the damage of that attack. So if they want to damage you, they have to make it over your deflection amount or score no damage. Womp womp. For talents, we want anything that says, "Hey, are those dots you got there? If yes, have some more dots." For instance, Acute Pain inflicts 100% more damage on an enemy the first time they suffer damage from a dot. And then Sickening Pain inflicts the enemy with Fatigued whenever they suffer 10% of their wounds in damage from a dot. That's going to happen a lot because of Acute Pain, so the enemy will always be suffering from a -10 penalty to strength, toughness, and agility, as well as reduced movement speed per stack. That can get ridiculous on larger, beefier enemies. Does It Hurt gives your dots a 20% crit chance, which synergizes well with Sickening Pain. Battle of Attrition gives all dots inflicted by the Executioner 20% extra damage each round, and it stacks. Everlasting Agony is a straight up buff to the Pain Resonance ability. It increases the effects for 1 round and increases the resistance test penalty to -26. It is a straight up upgrade, and because Pain Resonance works on dots applied to yourself and allies, it's gonna have a lot of uses. It Will Not Die is super helpful because remember, the more wounds we have, the more damage we can do. And then Anatomy Expert is for people who want more damage and plan on running certain items to boost their damage as their Meta-Kai goes up. Now it's time to talk about items. My builds are typically not gear focused because I like to make sure that my builds are viable even without the maximized gear loadouts. That way you don't have problems in the early game because your entire build depends on a weapon that you don't get until the end of the game. But gear can be helpful, so I'm going to tell you about the items I used, and you can decide if you want to use these items or a set of gear that fits better for your playstyle. First is the Carmine Crown. You don't get this item until the 3rd act, but it's a really good option for this build. It buffs your crit chance whenever a dot you inflicted damages your target, and it stacks, so this is great for burning down mini bosses or full-on big baddie bosses. The Condensed Carapace gives you decent protection and increases your crit chance in melee. The more we crit, the better. Voidborn's Pride increases our Meta-Kai by 10 whenever we kill an enemy, and it stacks. This has excellent synergy with Anatomy Expert, which gives you more wounds depending on your Meta-Kai. And remember, more wounds equals more damage. Now the Reconstructed Flamer Pistol, I don't use this much, but if I need to burn down a creature quickly, that extra 10% crit chance and crit damage is useful to maximize that damage potential. The Death Cult Power Blade is a DLC item that gives you a parry bonus equal to your agility bonus times 2, and a bonus to crit chance based on AGI bonus as well. It's not the best sword, It's just the best one I've found for her that's synergized with my chosen abilities. Lastly, the Executioner's Gauntlets are another DLC item that increases the crit damage of where it hurts by your Meta-Ki divided by 12. So to explain how all this works, Voidborn's Pride procs when killing an enemy and increases your Meta-Ki. When your Meta-Ki goes up, so does your health and your crit damage, and by stacking a lot of crit chance, we are getting crits more often. I think this is a pretty optimal setup that will take you through the rest of the game, but like I said, some of the items can't be found until Act 3, but the build is still plenty viable without the buffs provided by the gear. As a dancer of blades, your job is to take out the long-range threats on the battlefield, because those threats are typically not in a group and won't be taken out easily by your burst fire soldiers. You are capable of doing damage to multiple enemies, but you need to kill to get charges of death from above. So, focusing on one-shots on weaker enemies is where this build really shines. First, we should talk about team composition. The ideal team for my build ended up being my main character as a soldier, mirroring my Argenta burst fire build. Abelard for his single target shredding. You see, Abelard is the kind of guy that you want hunting down the beefy boys, because he can do around 200 or more damage per turn, twice a turn. It's silly. Then there's Heinrichs. Heinrichs is on Burn Squad. His deal is making people who are not on fire be on fire. He attacks someone with Ignite and then spreads that fire to as many people as possible, then culminates with a single target melt that gets stronger the more people are on fire around the target. He's a big old fiery little man, yes he is. Then we come to Cassia. Cassia is unique. She uses abilities that move enemies around and does damage to them when they move. Then, once they're all bunched up together, she blasts them with a cone of warp energy from her forehead hole. Most of the enemies hit by this will be stunned and unable to act in their next turn, which gives our soldiers a chance to burst all those clumped up enemies down with a full 4 frames per second of bolter rounds. In this matchup, our Blade Dancer's job is to clean up and take care of the annoyances. See, for the most part, everyone is going to be clumped up together to get the camaraderie bonus for the soldiers and wipe the board of most of the annoyances in the middle of the battlefield. KIBELLA's job is to circle the outside of the arena and take out the snipers, ranged characters, anything that's causing you issues that your other characters can't get to in time. With the Blade Dancer, you can close distance within a single round. The first thing you need to do is pop Captive Audience. We do this because we want our next attack to not only apply the bleed from our normal attacks, but a bonus from the ability. The more stacks, the better. We move closer, but stop short of melee distance. We open our attack with Death from Above because it will hit multiple enemies and apply the dots to both. Then we use the rest of our buffs and single target attack on the smallest guy in the group. After he pops, we get another charge of Death from Above that we can use on the remaining enemy. And to finish our turn, we use Blade Dance. If all of your attacks hit, you've done more than 200 damage in a single turn. Then if that weren't enough, if she's got her heroic action, she can make everyone in the entire arena who has dots take an extra instance of damage from each effect at 100% damage. She is a damage powerhouse who excels at closing in on distant enemies and jibbing them in a single turn. I had a lot of fun with this character given the abilities and the special mechanics that open up all kinds of new possibilities. She has a deceptive amount of utility in that you don't just have to use her as a hunter-seeker kind of character, but you can also use her to fight in the middle of a crowd that Cassia has disabled and rack up all kinds of clean kills and and then her damage potential, when used that way, goes through the roof. And because of acrobatic artistry, she could get herself out of the way after doing all that damage, so our soldiers can clean up after us with burst fire. I had a lot of fun with this DLC character, and I hope you do too. And if you want to see more videos like these, leave me a comment in the pinned comment and hit the like button. I have a build for each character in my team, and I would love to share them with you. So let me know if you want to see it and which character you'd like a build for next. And this has been a build from Strat-Edgy, and now that you've got it, go play some games.